The bright lights of the office flickered slightly, casting a warm glow over the rows of desks. Jenna sat at hers, tapping her pen against the notepad in front of her. The day had dragged on just like all the other days, filled with endless meetings and the hum of keyboards. She sighed, looking up as her coworker, Tim, walked back to his desk, wearing a grin that made her roll her eyes. Tim said, his voice loud enough to catch the attention of their small workspace. Jenna's eyebrows shot up at the mention of his name, Jack, the one person in the whole world who could get under her skin like nobody else. She scoffed quietly, shaking her head as she turned back to her notes. Just the thought of Jack made her feel uneasy, a mix of frustration and annoyance. She wouldn't let him ruin her day, again. But in the flicker of a second, tension filled the air when she saw her manager, Mr. Collins, walking straight toward Tim, a wide smile stretching across his face. Jenna straightened up, curiosity pulling her focus. What in the world was going on? Mr. Collins called as a tall figure entered the office. The atmosphere shifted. Everyone turned their heads and Jenna felt her stomach twist as she caught sight of him. Jack's dark hair fell perfectly, his crisp suit showing off his tall, athletic build. He had that same confident stride like he owned the place. The room felt charged, the energy unmistakable. "Welcome back," Mr. Collins said, practically beaming as he approached Jack. There was a salute, an actual salute, followed by the kind of professionalism that Jenna found both surprising and infuriating. She crossed her arms, gripping the edges of her desk, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. Why did everyone treat him like some kind of royalty? Jenna watched as coworkers gathered around, eager to hear about Jack's incredible adventures while he was gone. It made her want to gag. A wild mix of admiration and anger rose in her chest. She remembered the last time Jack had swaggered into her life, flaunting his ways. He had that charm that drew people in, but she knew better. She had seen the other side of Jack, the one that went beyond the charming smile and smooth words. The memories came rushing back. It was a few months ago when Jack had joined their team. At first, Jenna had been skeptical, but even she had to admit he had skills. However, those skills came chock full of ego. He would strut into meetings, casting his opinions like they were gold, while Jenna's ideas faded into the background like mere whispers. That wasn't the worst part. It was the way he'd looked at her sometimes, like she was just another notch on his belt. Jack had asked flippantly one day, his trademark smirk in place. The way he had leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes glittering with amusement, it made her want to punch him. She had made a brave attempt to brush off his comment, but the truth was she had noticed, she had hated it. And now here he was again, larger than life, greeted with care and respect while she felt like a ghost in her own office. "Can't believe you're back," Tim said, clapping Jack on the back. "What's the plan?" Laughter erupted, and Jenna felt bile rise in her throat. She tried to focus on her work, pretending she wasn't listening, but every sound, from the soft laughter to the enthusiastic claps, felt like tiny jabs. She forced herself to breathe deep, find her center. They could swoon over Jack all they wanted, but she didn't care, or at least she told herself she didn't. Then, as if sensing her simmering frustration, Jack's gaze found hers across the room. His eyes narrowed slightly, an amused glint dancing within them. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Jenna immediately snapped her gaze back down to her notes, anger bubbling up inside her. "Not today," she whispered to herself, her heart racing. But Jack had that way of getting under her skin, worming his way into her thoughts when she least expected it. He surged through the crowd of coworkers, pivoting his attention like a spotlight, and for a brief moment the world around her blurred. Even if she didn't want to admit it, he had this electric pull. The slight way he moved, the way he made everything feel more alive, even the most mundane moments. Jack called out, his voice cut through the chatter, playful yet piercing. Jenna felt heat rise to her cheeks. Why did he have to single her out? It was like he could sense her irritation and just wanted to poke the bear. "I'm not serious, just busy," she shot back, trying to keep her tone steady, but the slight shake in her voice gave it away. He grinned, and it made a flurry of butterflies erupt in her stomach. She hated him for that. She could feel the heat radiating off her colleagues, their eyes dancing between the two of them. Was this how it always was? Whatever charm Jack had, he'd clearly wrapped it around everyone else, but with her. Maybe a year ago, Jenna would have melted like the rest, but these days she had built walls thick and sturdy, ready to guard her heart from unwanted advances and disappointment. "I'd rather be working than starting a pointless argument," she added, her voice sharper than she intended, but she didn't care. Tension hung in the air, and Jenna took a deep breath, trying to shake the feeling of being cornered. Jack raised his hands defensively, the playful glint never leaving his eyes. No need to bite, Jenna. She rolled her eyes, dismissing him yet again, knowing fully well that her annoyance was more for show than anything. How could a simple interaction with him bring this intensity? The world around them continued its mundane rhythm, but here she was, caught in this strange pull. "See, serious," he bantered back with a smirk, and her lips tightened in response. She'd show him serious, but deep down something clicked, a small crack in her armor where curiosity seeped through. Jenna attempted to drown out the laughter and chatter, focusing on her work again. But in the corners of her mind, she couldn't help but think about how Jack had bowled everyone over with his charm. Jack on the island, they might have called him, the way he had spread infectious laughter, weaving himself into the hearts of her colleagues. Another meeting rolled around later that day, and of course Jack was there, fitting in seamlessly. Jenna observed quietly from the back, careful to hide her irritation. She noticed how Mr. Collins seemed to hang on Jack's every word, encouraging him more than anyone else. Mr. Collins asked, eyes wide with expectation. Jenna's heart pounded. It was always Jack, never her ideas, never her work. As Jack spoke, she felt anger boil inside her. The room was silent, captivated by his stories. He had a way of weaving words, turning even the most trivial matters into grand tales, but beneath his charm she could feel the manipulation. He was twisting the narratives to his advantage, leaving little scraps of praise for everyone else while ensuring the focus remained on him. Jenna couldn't bite her tongue any longer. "If I may," she interjected, her voice steady, though it quivered with hidden tension. The room fell silent, eyes shifting to her. Jack's gaze snapped to hers, surprise flashing in those deep eyes, unaware that Jenna had crafted her own interruptions. Everyone looked expectant, and she cleared her throat. "I think while Jack has some valid points, we should also consider the data we collected last quarter." Jack smirked, leaning back. "Data can be boring, Jenna. Engagement doesn't matter without results." Jenna shot back, feeling the weight of every shared glance. She wasn't backing down, not this time. The room was thick with tension again. It was thrilling, yet terrifying. The eye of the storm, but Jenna felt a tiny thrill run through her veins as Jack regarded her. He wasn't just the charming golden boy anymore. He had competition, and for the first time in his eyes she could see a flicker of respect or ire. It was murky. After the meeting ended, Jenna took a moment to breathe. She felt a rush of adrenaline, like she had emerged unscathed after a fierce battle. Stepping outside, she gathered her thoughts, only to feel someone beside her. "Nice comeback in there," Jack said, crossing his arms with that infuriating smile. She turned to walk away, but he caught up, matching her pace. "You know, I didn't mean to push buttons, Jenna. Just wanted to clarify a point," he continued, his tone almost softening. The challenge was still in his voice, however, and she remained on alert. "Well, you've got to remember I'm not just a side character in your story," she shot back, bravely meeting his gaze. "Never said you were," he replied, the smirk fading slightly. For a moment, all the noise faded away. There was just the two of them standing there, tension thick enough to slice. Jenna felt her walls trembling for the first time against this unexpected connection. She had fought against Jack, but now she didn't know if she wanted to push him away or draw him closer. "I don't want this to be a battle, Jenna," Jack finally said, his voice low, serious. "You've got the talent to stand on your own." She hated how those words crawled under her skin, igniting a mixture of gratitude and annoyance. He didn't get to hand out compliments like that, not when he had made her life challenging since day one. "Stay out of my head, Jack," she replied without venom, her voice steadying, though she felt a slight vulnerability creeping in. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, something raw and genuine, and she didn't know what to make of it. For a long moment they stood in silence, the air crackling with an electric tension. She didn't know what to say, and he didn't seem eager to break it either. Jenna felt her heart thumping loudly, and fleeting thoughts of what it would be like to let her guard down swirled in her mind. But all of it would have to wait, as Jack finally turned to walk away, glancing back over his shoulder. She swallowed hard, half determined to stay sure of her stance. Maybe she didn't have to roll her eyes at his name every time. As much as she wanted to keep fighting, there was an undeniable, nagging feeling pulling her in a new direction. Whether it was respect, rivalry, or something else, she didn't know yet, but she was ready to find out. Jenna turned back to the office, sensing that her world was on the cusp of change, whether she liked it or not. The room went silent, the kind of heavy silence that wraps around you like a thick blanket. Jenna could feel it, the weight of anticipation filling the air. She leaned back slightly in her chair, arms crossed, completely unbothered as Tim's excited voice broke through the quiet. "Did you hear?" Jenna rolled her eyes, an automatic reaction that escaped before she could stop it. Jack. Just the mention of his name made her stomach twist. The whole office seemed to buzz with excitement, but to Jenna, it felt like a storm brewing. He was the one person who could turn an ordinary day into a battlefield, and she was not ready for the chaos he carried in. As if summoned by the very whisper of his name, Jack strode through the glass doors. He looked like he belonged on a magazine cover, tall, confident, perfect smile effortlessly shining from under that tousled hair. Jenna couldn't mask her annoyance. How did he do it? How did he walk in like he owned the place while the rest of them went about their days with their heads down? Mr. Collins, her manager, was the first to approach him. Jenna watched, heart pounding, as Mr. Collins' face transformed into a grin usually saved for a long-lost hero. He said, practically beaming. Jenna clenched her jaw as Mr. Collins raised his hand in an exaggerated salute. Who did this guy think he was? In an instant, the energy shifted in the office. Jenna's coworkers flocked to Jack like moths to a flame, drawn in by his charm and presence. Even Tim, her trustworthy ally, seemed entranced. Jenna turned her gaze back to her notes, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand, but it was impossible to ignore the laughter and shouts of excitement echoing around her. One of her coworkers exclaimed, and Jenna felt her irritation growing like a wildfire. Forever wasn't long enough, in her opinion. What was it about him? He had this ability to command attention, to make people laugh and rally around him. While Jenna was focused on her work, quietly building her career, Jack made grand gestures and captured hearts. He had a way of weaving stories, each tale more impressive than the last, all while she felt like a wallflower in a crowded room. Still, it wasn't just jealousy that gnawed at her. It was a visceral hatred mixed with attraction and frustration, all tied up in a neat little bow of resentment. The minute he strolled in, it was as if he knew how to step on her last nerve. And today felt particularly vital. She couldn't let him steal her thunder. Jack teased from across the room, his voice smooth like butter. Jenna felt everyone's attention shift to her. She held her breath, annoyance bubbling up like a volcano ready to erupt. She glanced at him, meeting his gaze briefly before forcing a fake smile. "Some of us have jobs to do, Jack," she replied coolly, trying to match his nonchalance. The room fell silent, an electric charge moving through the air. Jack raised an eyebrow, looking amused. For a split second, she could see a glimmer of challenge in his eyes. "Touché," he said, but the smirk on his lips didn't fade. "But sometimes you need to lighten up." He laughed, and the crowd around them joined in like they were part of a synchronized dance. In that moment, something shifted in her. He wasn't just annoying. He was invading her thoughts, turning her work into a stage for all his ridiculous antics. Jenna turned her focus back to her notes, determined to drown out the laughter that echoed in her ears. But as the day progressed, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she had lost a round in some invisible game they were playing. Everything Jack did seemed to signal victory, and she was tired of being sidelined. During a meeting later in the afternoon, Jack effortlessly took the spotlight yet again. Mr. Collins turned to him, eyes gleaming. Jenna folded her arms in irritation, knowing what was coming. He would charm his way through it, spinning tales of grandeur, and there she'd sit unseen, unheard. Jack spoke passionately, his voice dancing through the room, and Jenna felt a knot tighten in her chest. The way he painted ideas brought the project to life, captivating everyone, but inside her, bitterness simmered. Why was he always the one to shine? Finally, she could stand it no longer. "If I may," she interjected, her voice steady but crisp. The room turned to her, everyone holding their breath. Even Jack paused, surprise flickering across his face. Mr. Collins prompted, clearly intrigued. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the tension building inside her. "While Jack has some valid points, I think we need to consider the data we gathered last quarter." The tension escalated, her heart raced. Jack's eyes widened slightly, an unreadable expression crossing his face. Jenna kept her focus sharp, refusing to back down. "You're missing the bigger picture, though," he shot back, a hint of challenge in his voice. "Engagement matters, Jenna. Numbers don't lie, Jack." Her conviction rang through the room, each word a small victory. The moment hung in the air like a pendulum, swinging between them. People exchanged glances, unspoken narratives weaving through the group. Jenna felt the undertow of admiration from some, while Jack's playful smirk returned. The playful banter had transformed into a battlefield. "Yes, but the essence of this is to make the team feel part of something bigger than just numbers," Jack insisted, the challenge in his eyes ignited. Jenna's heart thudded in her chest. They were two sides of a coin, one grounded in reality, the other soaring in dreams, but she wasn't about to let him sway the room completely. The confrontation electrified the room, and for a moment Jenna felt powerful, alive. It was a fierce dance, a clash of minds that meant something, not just to her but to the entire team. Mr. Collins cleared his throat, sensing the tension, and congratulated Jenna for her insights. Jenna felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe today was a win after all. But as the meeting wrapped up, she noticed Jack's gaze lingering on her, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. Later that afternoon, as Jenna sat at her desk, the adrenaline high from their debate still surging through her, she caught sight of Jack lingering by the coffee machine, deep in conversation with some colleagues. It was strange seeing him in a lighter moment, laughing genuinely, uninhibited. Before she could sort through her feelings, he turned and caught her eye. That glimmer of challenge returned, mixed with something else, a flicker of respect. He called out casually. Jenna hesitated, debating her options. She could ignore him, retreat back behind her wall, or she could answer. Against her better judgment, she stood, feeling her heart quicken with unease. She asked, crossing her arms defensively. He gestured toward the small kitchen area. "Come help me strategize for the next meeting." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Sure, why not? You're good at what you do." Rather than bickering, "Let's work together." It was almost refreshing to see this side of him. He was more than just the guy everyone loved. Jenna felt a flicker of doubt creep in. "So now you want to collaborate?" He chuckled lightly. "Hey, I'm just trying to stay afloat in the sea of goals. But I can't do it alone, and neither can you." There was something magnetic about how he challenged her, pushing against her reservations. "Okay, fine," she conceded, the thrill of collaboration washing over her, lightening her heart. They spent the next hour discussing, bouncing ideas off one another like athletes training for a championship. Jack wasn't just charming, he was resourceful, and for the first time, Jenna found herself drawn in, not just by the idea of working alongside him, but by the notion of partnership itself. As they wrapped up, Jenna felt the shift within her. "Maybe you're not so bad, Jack," she admitted reluctantly. He smiled, his eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief, her voice laced with humor, a rare chuckle escaping her lips. But as the weeks passed, she found herself enjoying the exchanges with Jack more than she anticipated. Their debates turned into strategies and challenge transformed into camaraderie. The office had become a place of innovation, and with the combined energy of their contrasting styles, they began to create not just projects, but something greater. Jenna had always believed in her independence, her work ethic, in standing out without needing anyone else. But with Jack, she learned to navigate the tides of collaboration without losing her footing. It was not about being locked in competition, it was about sharing the spotlight. One afternoon, after presenting their joint project to the team, Jenna couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. The enthusiasm in the room was infectious, and for the first time, the focus was not just on Jack or her alone, but on their shared accomplishments. And then, amidst the applause and cheers, Jack turned to her, his expression sincere. She laughed, her heart racing with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Really? Well, I saw that fire in you. Jenna's heart fluttered at his words, but she quickly chuckled it off. Maybe a little, he admitted, his smile playful. The dynamic had shifted, a friendship that had blossomed between them amid heated debates and laughter. Perhaps it was Jack, or perhaps it was her newfound understanding of what partnership could signal. As they left the conference room, Jenna felt lighter, ready to take on whatever came next. She glanced back at Jack, who was still basking in the celebrations of their hard work. The drama she once felt toward him had transformed into something new, something much more profound. In that moment, she realized that sometimes the people who challenge us the most could also teach us the most. Jack might have been the one to make her roll her eyes, but he was also the one who helped her find her voice, and that was worth so much more. With a smile, she took a deep breath and walked forward, embracing this new chapter, ready to navigate the challenges together. Together, they turned the page into an unknown, hopeful future, drawing strength from each other, ready to face the world side by side. Tim's voice rang out over the chatter of the office, and with it, the room seemed to hold its breath. Jenna felt her heart sink at the very mention of his name. She rolled her eyes so hard she almost thought she could see her own brain. Jack, the office golden boy, the one who had this unnatural ability to charm everyone in a 5-mile radius. Just the thought of him brought a tight knot to her stomach. As she sat at her desk, the hum of her coworkers' excitement swirled around her. They began gathering near the entrance, eager for the moment Jack would walk in. Meanwhile, Jenna forced her attention back to her monitor, fighting the urge to peek over her cubicle wall to see what all the fuss was about. Before she could convince herself to stay focused on her work, Jack strolled in, and the energy of the room shifted instantly. Here he was, a striking figure with that confident smile, perfectly messy hair, and a polished suit that made it look like he had just stepped off a runway. Mr. Collins, their manager, shot up from his chair, grinning broadly, and to Jenna's disbelief, threw a salute at Jack. "Welcome back," he exclaimed with an enthusiasm that rang through the office like an alarm bell. Jenna pinched the bridge of her nose, trying hard not to laugh. This was ridiculous. "He's not a war hero, Collins," she muttered under her breath, but no one seemed to hear. They were too busy flocking around Jack, hanging onto his every word as if he were dropping pearls of wisdom. Feeling more isolated than ever, Jenna picked up her coffee cup, her mind racing. Why was it that Jack could have their boss saluting him like he'd fought for his country while she sat quietly in the shadows? She had been working harder, showing up early and putting in late hours, yet here he was smiling, charming, and stealing the spotlight as if it belonged to him by birthright. In moments like these, it was easy for Jenna to feel invisible. She had this fierce drive within her and undeniable talent, but Jack's presence was an avalanche, burying everything under an unyielding mass of charm. Just the thought of it felt draining. As the day wound on, Jenna did her best to focus, head down, clicking away at her keyboard. But every few minutes, the laughter and chatter from the small crowd around Jack pierced her concentration. It was infuriating. Jack was filling the room with life, and Jenna felt her patience wearing thin. She had been here longer than he had, and it seemed unfair that all of her hard work was overshadowed by a few cool stories of his adventures abroad. Jenna. Tim's voice pulled her back to reality. She looked up to see concern etched across his face. "I'm fine," she replied, more sharply than she intended. He shot her a teasing grin, and she felt her cheeks flush. "It's not that, he just makes everything about himself, you know." Tim nodded empathetically. "He does have a way of grabbing attention." Jenna shot him a look, not defending him. She rolled her eyes again, but this time it felt less like a chore and more like a ritual. Later that afternoon, an all-hands meeting was scheduled, which caused a ripple of excitement through the office. Jenna prepared herself for the onslaught of Jack's charisma once more. When the meeting began, Mr. Collins eagerly introduced Jack, who quickly stood up, exuding confidence. Jenna perched on the edge of her seat, arms crossed tightly, trying to mask her tension. The room filled with applause, and Jack took a moment to acknowledge his audience. "Thank you, everyone. It's great to be back. I've missed this place," he began, his voice rich and warm. He launched into a dazzling presentation filled with high-energy storytelling, effortlessly weaving in anecdotes that made everyone laugh. Jenna felt her irritation bubbling up, turning into a quiet rage. It felt like they were in a cult, rapt and infatuated as he spoke, and she was the lone dissenter. As Jenna watched the crowd hang on to his every word, she found herself begrudgingly admiring his ability to engage. It was infuriating, almost enchanting, but she forced herself to lean back, trying to brush aside the emotion clawing at her insides. Just as she thought Jack couldn't possibly take it any further, he flashed a grin. "Now I know I've only been gone for a little while, but I hope you'll all help me in welcoming some new ideas." And Jenna, her heart raced as he pointed at her, the room falling quiet again. "I'd love to hear your thoughts on the data we've collected." Everyone turned to look at her. Jenna's mind raced as the anticipation felt almost unbearable. Sure," she stammered, caught off guard. I do have some insights." But Jack had already shifted his focus back to his presentation, leaving her hanging. It was just like him. He would pull her in and then brush her aside without a second thought. About halfway through the meeting, Mr. Collins asked for input on Jack's ideas and people jumped in enthusiastically. But when Jenna tried to speak, her words felt stifled by the overwhelming energy in the room. She hesitated, unsure of how to interject. "Maybe we should consider the data analysis more closely before making such big decisions," she said softly, almost too quietly to be heard. Jack glanced her way, a glimmer of acknowledgement flashing in his eyes. Absolutely, his words felt dismissive, yet everyone nodded along, agreeing with him. This was the moment Jenna had dreaded. They might have been collaborating, but he had once again eclipsed her voice. "Listen," she interrupted again, this time louder, flicking her energy. "The team needs to understand that facts matter." Tension rippled through the room, drawing their attention like magnets. Jack stood there, momentarily caught off guard, and she felt a thrill of triumph surge within her, but it was quickly swallowed up by his effortless comeback. "True, Jenna," he said, flashing that disarming smile. The room roared with laughter, and she felt her chest tighten as they turned back to him, drinking in his words. No one even seemed to acknowledge her point. It was like fighting against a tide. After the meeting wrapped up, Jenna felt deflated. Tim approached her. "You made some solid points in there," he reassured her. "Just, I get that," she sighed, shaking her head, "but he always receives the credit. Sometimes it's not about the volume of your voice, but where it resonates," Tim replied, serious for a moment. Jenna couldn't shake her frustration. She was tired of being taken for granted, especially by someone like Jack. It felt like she was running a race where he was always a few steps ahead. Later that week, as Jenna stared at her computer screen, adjusting numbers on a spreadsheet, she felt a shadow flicker across her desk. She looked up to see Jack standing there, hands in his pockets, his usual smile replaced with something softer. He asked, tentative but bold. She raised an eyebrow, wary of engaging with him again. "About the meeting." "Why?" She shot back, crossing her arms defiantly. His expression faltered. "That's not what I intended." Jenna hesitated, but something in his sincerity drew her in. "Fine, why do you feel so strongly about the data? I get it, data is important." Jack's vulnerability broke down her defenses just a little. "Look," she said, trying to moderate her tone. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Okay, I see your point, but what if we combine both? Your analytical side is amazing, and with my storytelling." Jenna raised her eyebrow, skepticism dancing in her gaze. "I'm serious," he said earnestly. "You're not just a number cruncher, you have incredible ideas and vision." As he spoke, Jenna felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was more to Jack than just the office's golden boy. "Fine," she replied, cautiously optimistic. Over the next few weeks, they met often, trading ideas, pushing each other to think creatively. They would run into arguments, but they were productive, filled with respect and a newfound understanding. Jenna realized that Jack brought out a boldness in her, and she was starting to push back rather than withdraw. Jack had a contagious energy, and slowly Jenna began to let down her guard. The more they collaborated, the more she enjoyed the fire that sparked between them, two contrasting personalities finding common ground. One afternoon, as they prepared for another meeting, Jenna turned to him. Jack chuckled, a genuine grin spreading across his face. The chemistry between them shifted. It was tangible. Maybe they weren't just colleagues anymore. They were becoming allies, partners in the best way possible. When the day of the project presentation arrived, Jenna felt a mix of nervous excitement. But this time, Jack stood alongside her, a team. They delivered their pitch together, merging data with storytelling in a way that captivated the audience. Each point Jenna made was met with admiration, not overshadowed by Jack's presence. Instead, he amplified it. As the meeting ended, the room erupted into applause. Jenna's heart swelled with an emotion she hadn't expected: pride. The two of them had combined their strengths, creating something impactful. Mr. Collins praised their collaboration, but more importantly, he specifically acknowledged Jenna's insights and hard work. It felt like a collective victory, and she breathed a sigh of relief. As they left the room, Jack turned to her, his smile bright. Jenna felt heat rising in her cheeks. "It's nice to see the real you," he said, his tone shifting. For the first time, Jenna saw not just an arrogant competitor, but a teammate who respected her voice. Perhaps they were learning from one another after all. Thanks for this, Jack. Definitely, he replied, and the warmth in his gaze sent a flutter of excitement through her. Maybe that initial eye roll was just the beginning of something breathtakingly unexpected. As the weeks went by, Jenna found herself looking forward to work not just for the projects, but for the connection she was forging with Jack. The tension that once existed had morphed into a friendship founded on challenge and respect. In the end, the journey transformed them both. Jenna had learned to speak up, to stand her ground and be assertive, while Jack had discovered the importance of collaboration, realizing there was strength in numbers, especially when those numbers are created with passion and understanding. Together, they had rewritten their narratives, shifting from rivalry to something richer. As they walked down the halls, side by side, Jenna felt a renewed sense of purpose. All of the initial resistance was worth discovering this new bond, a connection neither of them had anticipated but ultimately cherished. In that busy office, two unlikely allies had emerged, and the world felt less intimidating. With their shared laughter and creative sparks, the future was full of possibility, with respect transforming into something deeper. And as Jenna looked over at Jack, the anger and frustration that had once bubbled beneath the surface evaporated into a new chapter, a chapter where they both could stand tall together. Tim's voice sliced through the hum of the office like a siren. The moment those words left his lips, a ripple of excitement spread through the room. Jenna felt her heart sink. Jack, the very name was enough to send her stomach into a knot. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so instinctive it barely registered as she returned to her screen. Why did everyone act like he was some kind of celebrity? Couldn't they see through the facade? Every time Jack returned from one of his so-called business trips, it felt like the premiere of a blockbuster film. He swaggered in, looking effortlessly flawless, his confidence radiating in waves. Jenna couldn't help but feel the shadows creep in around her as her coworkers circled him like moths to a flame. There it was, the unmistakable sound of heels clicking against the polished floor. Jenna glanced up just in time to see Mr. Collins stand up, arms wide open. "Welcome back, Jack." To her utter disbelief, Mr. Collins threw a salute, a cheeky gesture that made Jenna snort. Seriously. Wasn't a war hero, he just went to another conference. For a moment, she marveled at how easily Jack made people forget the nuances of hard work. Her coworkers gathered around him, hanging on his every word as if he were dispensing wisdom from some ancient scroll. The excitement was palpable, electrifying the air around them, and internal frustration bubbled in Jenna's chest. "He's not that great," she muttered under her breath. Tim leaned over, eyebrows raised. "Come on, he's a solid guy." "Charm," Jenna shot back, shaking her head with disdain. Yet in that moment something clicked. Watching Tim's tone, Jenna realized this wasn't just about her irritation. Jack's magnetic pull was making her invisible, and she hated it. Why couldn't the world see the hard work she put into her job? As the afternoon wore on, Jenna buckled down and focused on her reports, trying to drown out the laughter that echoed from the other side of the room. But every few minutes the chatter crept into her ears like a gossiping next-door neighbor. Jack was holding court, regaling tales of his time away, stories that, without fail, placed him in the center of adventure and excitement. Jenna felt both anger and admiration bubble within her. Why should he reap all the rewards while she quietly crushed numbers and strategized in the shadows? Amid her spiraling thoughts, the all-hands meeting rolled around and the entire office filed into the conference room. Jenna squirmed in her seat, ready to brace herself for the inevitable Jack show. Mr. Collins announced, gesturing towards Jack, who took center stage with a flourish. Jenna rolled her eyes again, although this time it felt more like a reflex. Jack launched into his presentation, his charisma coated in confidence. He floated around the room, engaging people with anecdotes that had them laughing and relating to him. Jenna fumed silently, feeling her frustration build. She could hardly speak over the tidal wave of enthusiasm drowning out her voice. "Now we could go this route or that route," Jack said, painting a vivid picture, his hands moving animatedly. All eyes turned to her. The air became heavy, and her heart raced as Jack pointed at her. It felt like being thrust into the spotlight of a reality show. What had happened to his charm? It felt like a setup rather than an opportunity. She stammered, the uncertainty gnawing at her. "I mean, your ideas are interesting, but we also need to consider the data we've compiled." Jack raised an eyebrow and the room seemed to hold its breath. "But data can be dry, Jenna," he replied with a grin. A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd, and Jenna felt the heat rise to her cheeks. The moment she had crept in to take, it was slipping through her fingers yet again. But she began, but was cut off by Jack. He asked, moving on, allowing laughter to roll over her words like a wave crashing against the shore. Her shoulders tensed, and she sat back, anger and frustration battling for dominance. Why did he always have to play the hero? It felt like a chore to bring her ideas to the table when everyone was clearly mesmerized by his charm. When the meeting concluded, Jenna grabbed her things and hurried out. "Hey, you did great in there," Tim said, running beside her. "I didn't do anything," she snapped, her voice harsher than intended. "Don't be too hard on yourself," Tim replied, trying to soften the blow. "He's got that charm, it works for him." "Yeah, well, it definitely doesn't feel that way," she said bitterly. "Maybe you just need to find your confidence," Tim encouraged. "Use your voice." Later that week, Jenna steeled herself for another meeting. This time, she prepared notes, planning to speak her mind. Close to the end of the session, Mr. Collins turned to her. "Jenna, do you have anything to add?" The room turned expectantly toward her, tension hanging in the air. Jenna swallowed, her palms sweaty, but felt a surge of determination. "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "While Jack's ideas are entertaining, I think we need a solid foundation." Jack turned to her, clearly taken aback. "That's a fair point, Jenna," he replied, his tone more respectful than dismissive this time. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. For the first time, she saw a flicker of respect in his eyes, something unguarded. And just like that, the room was transfixed for a moment, caught in the balance of their verbal exchange. Jenna felt the tension dissolve a little, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Weeks passed, and Jenna found herself oscillating between frustration and newfound determination. Every time Jack entered a room, she felt the heat rising, but she wouldn't let that deter her. She began to share her insights more boldly, and to her surprise, Jack truly listened. One afternoon, as they prepared for a big company-wide presentation, Jenna found herself pacing, going over her notes, nerves bubbling inside her. Jack stepped beside her, a confident smile on his lips. He asked, his voice calm. "Not really, just trying not to think about tripping over my words in front of everyone," she admitted, chewing her bottom lip. Jack chuckled, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You've got this. Just remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being authentic." "Easy for you to say," she replied, amazed at how calm he seemed. "Maybe we can work together on it." A flicker of hope ignited within her, and Jenna nodded, rekindling the resolve she had nurtured. The instant the meeting began, she felt every ounce of nervousness melt away. The presentation was a collaboration between two minds, blending data with humanity. As Jenna took her turn, she no longer felt like a ghost in a room filled with vibrant figures. Jack's presence turned from a looming shadow into a supportive backdrop. Together, they illuminated their ideas in a way that made everyone sit up and take notice. The applause at the end resonated through Jenna's chest and filled her with warmth. "You were remarkable," Jack said afterwards, his voice sincere. "Thanks, you were awesome too," she replied, a smile creeping onto her face. The moment felt surreal, a moment where they had both found their footing and combined their strengths to create something bigger. In the following weeks, the dynamic shifted. Jenna discovered a synergy between her analytical mindset and Jack's charismatic storytelling. They complemented each other seamlessly, and soon the tension of previous weeks morphed into camaraderie. Then one day, as they wrapped up a productive meeting, Jack turned to her, a playful grin on his face. Jenna laughed, a genuine sound echoing in the quiet room. "Absolutely, but I've come to realize you're more than just a name. You've got this fire." "Thank you, Jack," she replied, her voice softer. "And I'm sorry if I judged you wrongly too." Jack nodded, the light shining back in his eyes. As they walked out of the meeting together, Jenna couldn't help but feel hopeful. The journey had melted away barriers, transforming their rivalry into a partnership that enabled them both to flourish. With every challenge they faced, they grew stronger together. Jenna was beginning to see Jack through a different lens, not just the golden boy who stole the spotlight, but as a partner with his own vulnerabilities, someone who recognized and respected her talent. In the end, it wasn't just about rolling eyes and salutes. It was about forging connections, breaking down barriers, and embracing the complexity that comes with working alongside someone who initially seemed impossible to understand. Together, they shifted the course of their journey into unknown but exciting territory, a team built on trust, respect, and ultimately friendship. As they stepped into that new horizon, Jenna knew they were ready for whatever came next, armed with a connection that neither had anticipated but both cherished deeply. Tim's voice pierced through the office chatter, and it was like throwing a stone into calm water. Jenna felt her stomach drop at the very mention of his name. Instinctively, she rolled her eyes, the gesture so automatic she barely gave it a second thought. Jack. The mere sound of his name made her blood boil and her nerves tingle. Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Jenna could see her coworkers perk up, eyes lighting with anticipation. They gathered near the entrance, whispering and laughing, framing the moment when he would walk through those glass doors. As the door swung open, there he was, striking and confident, with that familiar, easy smile that seemed to disarm everyone. Jenna had to hand it to him. He looked like he stepped out of an advertisement, perfectly put together in his tailored suit. The sun hit him just right, almost haloing him in a glow that seemed to make others awe. Mr. Collins, their manager, stood up from his desk, a huge grin across his face. "Welcome back, Jack," he called out, arms wide open in greeting. To Jenna's utter shock, he threw a salute, like a drill sergeant welcoming a war hero home. Jenna could hardly believe it. "He really isn't that special," she mumbled under her breath, but the words felt heavy in the air. Jack sauntered in, greeting everyone as if they were long-lost friends. Resentment churned in Jenna's stomach as she took a deep breath, trying to focus on her work. But the sound of laughter from the growing crowd near Jack turned her irritation into a simmering rage. What was it about him? His charm was almost magical, drawing people in while she felt like a forgotten shadow in the corner. She had been working hard, pouring her sweat and soul into her role, yet Jack seemed to stroll through life effortlessly, basking in the glow of admiration. By mid-morning, the buzz died down just enough for Jenna to catch a moment of peace. She settled into her tasks for the day, her fingers tapping away at the keyboard, but the commotion around Jack stuck to her like glue. The laughter, the excitement, why were they so easily enchanted? In that moment of frustration, she couldn't help but think back to her initial impressions of Jack. It wasn't just envy, it was a battle of wills, a contest she was losing miserably. Every meeting, every conversation brought the same wave of irritation. Jack just jumped in, spinning tales from his travels and charming everyone, while Jenna's insights often went unnoticed, wallflowers blooming in a crowded room. When the weekly all-hands meeting arrived, Jenna steeled herself. She knew it would be a showcase for Jack. As the team filtered in, she could already feel the heaviness in the air, a collective anticipation that sent unpleasant shivers down her spine. Mr. Collins announced with a flourish, and it felt like a scene from a grand stage performance. Jenna squinted at the projector screen, mentally preparing her rebuttal. Jack started with his usual flair, recounting his adventures and successes from his time away. The crowd laughed and clapped, completely wrapped up in his charisma. Meanwhile, Jenna's frustration set in, simmering like a pot about to boil over. "And of course, I'd love to hear from our very own Jenna," Jack said, turning toward her mid-story with that infuriatingly charming grin. Everyone turned, eyes fixed on her as if waiting for a reveal. The tension in the air thickened. She stammered, feeling the heat rush to her cheeks. Before she could finish, he interjected. "We can't forget about the joy in our work, right?" The room erupted in laughter again, and Jenna felt herself sinking further into the fabric of her chair, her moment slipping through her fingers like sand. What had happened to the data-driven discussions that had once filled their meetings? The analytical approach, grounded in reality, felt overshadowed by Jack's explosive personality. It was as if he had every answer, while she struggled to even make a statement. After the meeting, anger bubbled within her. She vented to Tim, who lingered beside her. Tim looked thoughtful. "He's confident, Jenna. Everyone loves a good story with a smile, but you have the numbers, the facts." She sighed deeply. That question haunted her for days. Jenna decided it was time to make a change. Maybe it was time to speak up. As the next week rolled around, she prepared herself for the next meeting, reviewing her notes meticulously. When Mr. Collins once again turned to her, the weight of the moment settled over her like a heavy quilt. The eyes of the entire room turned to her as if she were on a stage. "I believe we need to take a step back and look at the data a little deeper." Jack turned to her, eyebrows raised in surprise. "That's a valid concern, Jenna, but maybe passion needs to lead the way sometimes." The tension hung in the air, thick like honey, and Jenna clung to her notes, heart racing. This was new territory for her, but she wouldn't back down. She had a voice, and today she planned to use it. "Yes, but without a solid foundation, our excitement could lead us off a cliff." The room felt different this time. Jack nodded slowly, processing her words. The change in their dynamic shimmered like morning light breaking through fog. For once, it felt like the right battle was being fought, and he respected her stance. Days turned into weeks, and the more Jenna spoke up, the more Jack shifted in his approach. They began talking, a mix of logic and creativity dancing together in the office. While Jack had always engaged people with stories, Jenna brought the structure to those tales. At first, she relished the challenge of standing her ground against Jack, and he in turn seemed to appreciate her insights. Their debates turned into collaborations, pushing them both to find balance as they merged their approaches. One afternoon, they sat side by side, brainstorming for another upcoming meeting. Jenna felt the excitement build within her as she tossed ideas into the air like confetti. "I appreciate how you brought data to our proposals. I think we can really make an impact together," Jack said, glancing her way with a spark of sincerity. "Thanks, Jack. Your enthusiasm is contagious." In their collaborative efforts, a sense of camaraderie blossomed. They went from competing for attention to building something meaningful together. Jenna felt lighter. No longer was she wrestling with her voice. Instead, it now rang out in harmony. As the weeks rolled on, their chemistry evolved. One day, Jack kicked back in his chair, stretching his arms overhead. "You know, I underestimated you at first," he admitted, leaning back. Jenna couldn't help but chuckle. Jack feigned offense, egotistical. "Okay, maybe just a little," she laughed. Their laughter rang through the office, drawing puzzled glances from coworkers. But in that moment, something shifted. A bridge was built over the turbulent waters of their past. Jenna felt a growing sense of relief blending with an unexpected affection. By the time the big presentation rolled around, Jenna felt a mix of nerves and excitement, but this time it was different. She stood beside Jack, who nodded at her encouragingly as they walked into the conference room together, prepared to present a report that was both data and riveting storytelling. As they finished their presentation, the room erupted into applause, and Jenna looked over at Jack, surprised to see his expression mirroring her own joy. Both of their strengths brought to life something bigger than they had envisioned separately. She exclaimed, a wide grin spreading across her face. Jack chuckled, lowering his voice to conspiratorial levels. "Well, I guess we both learned something," Jenna said, her tone light. As they began to pack up, Mr. Collins approached them, a proud smile plastered across his face. "Fantastic work, both of you." With that, Jenna's heart soared. For the first time, she felt seen not just as Jack's foil, but as a vital part of the team. Later that day, she found herself in the break room, pouring a cup of coffee when Jack ambled in. "Hey, there's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said, leaning casually against the counter. "Go ahead," Jenna replied, curious. "Do you think we can keep this partnership going?" For a moment she hesitated, the question stirring unexpected feelings. She had focused so hard on seeing Jack's flaws that she hadn't noticed how he had come to respect her. "I'd like that," she said sincerely. "Great, then let's show them what we can do." As the days turned into weeks, Jenna and Jack became a force within the office. No longer just separate entities, they were a cohesive team that balanced creativity and analysis, bringing forth new ideas and gaining the attention of the higher-ups. The playful banter that had once annoyed Jenna now made her smile. She found joy in their sparring, and she and Jack began to see each other as allies rather than rivals. One afternoon, as they were finalizing a presentation for an important client, Jenna couldn't help but feel grateful for the journey. This was no longer about resentment, it was about growth. Jack said, breaking her train of thought, "You really turned things around for me." She turned, meeting his gaze, feeling a warmth spread in her chest. "Thank you, I think we both have grown," he replied, laughter bubbling up between them. In that moment, any trace of animosity faded, replaced with respect and understanding. They had busted through their walls, emerging on the other side as friends. As they wrapped their work for the day, Jenna reflected on how she had once rolled her eyes at Jack's name, only to now see the value in the perspectives they had shared. They were both more than just their roles, they were partners who had helped each other climb higher. That busy office filled with conversations and bustling energy, Jenna felt a sense of belonging. They weren't just coworkers, they were a team ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. As she walked out of the office beside Jack, their laughter echoed through the hallways, a bright note amidst the everyday grind. Maybe it all began with eye rolls and salutes, but now it was transformed into something powerful, a partnership that often defied expectations and brought forth innovation, joy, and lastingness. They had shown everyone and themselves that sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that can change the game. Tim's voice pealed through the hum of the office, raising a buzz that felt electric. Jenna barely looked up from her screen, but her heart sank. It wasn't just the sound of his name, it was the excitement that followed it. She rolled her eyes, the gesture so instinctive she hardly noticed it. Jack was like an unwelcome shadow, looming over everything she tried to achieve. The door swung open and in he strode, radiating an aura of effortless charm. Tall, confident, with that perfectly tousled hair and a grin that could melt the sternest of hearts. Jenna resisted the urge to groan. Why did everyone treat him like he was some kind of rock star? Mr. Collins, their manager, was the first to move, practically jumping from his desk, excitement radiating off him. "Welcome back, Jack," he declared, stretching his arms wide as if inviting Jack to swoop in for a big hug. Then came the salute, a gesture so exaggerated that Jenna found it comedic. What was he, a general? She bit her lip, trying to suppress a laugh, but her annoyance only peaked. "He's not that great," she muttered under her breath, though the line felt a little hollow, like a defense she barely believed. Around her, the office buzzed with activity. Jack's return was the highlight of the week, and everyone seemed drawn in by his magnetic energy. Tim nudged her, a teasing smile on his face. "What's your problem, Jenna?" "No," she shot back quickly. "I just can't stand this hero worship." Tim shrugged, glancing at Jack, who was now in the center of a growing crowd. "He has charm," she snapped, while simultaneously wishing she could speak with even half the confidence Jack emitted effortlessly. It dug at her how he could waltz through the office, leaving her feeling invisible. As Jack regaled their coworkers with tales from his latest trip, Jenna's irritation morphed into something dark, resentment mixed with self-doubt. She had put in years of hard work, late nights, and countless sacrifices, and yet here was this guy, charming everyone in sight while she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. When the all-hands meeting finally rolled around, Jenna braced herself. If Jack's welcome had been a concert, this was the grand finale. Mr. Collins stood at the front, clearly excited to introduce him again. Collins exclaimed, and the room erupted in applause. Jenna felt enveloped in discontented silence, her heart pounding like a drum. Jack stood tall, wearing that infamous smile, ready to engage the crowd. He began his presentation, weaving in stories filled with humor, letting charisma drip from each word like honey. The laughter around Jenna felt suffocating. It became increasingly clear that Jack would steal the show again. "Now I want to hear from you, Jenna," Jack said suddenly, turning his attention directly to her. The room fell silent, all eyes shifting to her, and an unexpected rush of panic bubbled in her stomach. She began but faltered as laughter from the audience cut through the moment like a knife. "Engagement is crucial," Jack chimed in smoothly while the room nodded in eager agreement. Jenna wanted to scream. The tension was palpable. She had wanted to contribute and found her voice stomped into the ground by his bluster. She managed to get a few words out. Jack's golden boy aura made it hard for her to push through. Of course, he chuckled, and the crowd roared with laughter again, drawing their focus back to him. Jenna sat back in her seat, defeated. Her words didn't matter here, not next to Jack. The disillusionment felt like a hand closing around her throat. When the meeting finally ended, she bolted out of the room, seeking solace in the break room. "I can't believe this," she vented to Tim. "Maybe he is," Tim said, shrugging casually, "but you shouldn't let him get to you." "Yeah, but it doesn't feel like it," she said, a lump forming in her throat. Frustration clung to her like a second skin. How long could she continue feeling this way? The next week, she resolved to take matters into her own hands. The all-hands meeting was coming up again, and she had prepared herself. This time, she would voice her thoughts, regardless of how it felt. As Mr. Collins turned to her once more, she felt the familiar pressure in the room. Heads turned, ears tuned. This time, the stakes felt different, electric in a way. "I think we need to dive deeper into the data." Jack regarded her, his expression shifting for just a moment. "That's true, Jenna. We need a balance." The challenge hung in the air between them like a tense wire. "And the story has to be backed by facts," Jenna countered, feeling her voice strengthen. For a moment, she could see him processing her words, a flicker of respect glimmering in his eyes. Maybe there was hope for this awkward dance after all. As the weeks passed, Jenna leaned into this new dynamic. She spoke with more confidence, often sparring verbally with Jack, exploring ideas and really challenging each other. What began as rivalry morphed into productive conversation. They sharpened each other's ideas like raw stone into polished gem. One afternoon, the two of them were hunched over a presentation, reviewing slides and discussing data points. Amid the serious atmosphere, Jack turned to Jenna and said, "You know, I didn't think much of you at first, but you bring something essential to the table." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. "Thanks, Jack, I'd say the same for you." He leaned back in his chair, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Look at us," she laughed, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Perhaps they weren't so different after all. When the annual presentation to the executives arrived, Jenna felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. They worked tirelessly, blending data with storytelling, each putting their unique flair into the final product. As they stood in front of the team, Jenna felt the familiar tension but also a flicker of motivation. They delivered the presentation with flair, seamlessly flowing from one topic to another, drawing everyone in. The applause that followed reverberated through Jenna's chest, filling her with a sense of accomplishment. She turned to Jack, who flashed a genuine smile. He said, voice thick with joy. "Yeah," she replied, a rush of adrenaline washing over her. Their teamwork had transformed into something truly special, a mutual respect that had grown from the once bitter rivalry. Days turned to weeks, and their partnership solidified, becoming a cornerstone of their work. Jack asked one afternoon, "Sure, I could use some energy," she replied, feeling a lightness in her step. As they stood at the coffee machine, the atmosphere between them had shifted. What had once felt competitive now felt comfortable. "You know, all those initial eye rolls have turned into something unexpected," Jack joked, raising an eyebrow. Jenna's laughter filled the air. "Yeah, well, it took time for me to see you as anything but a rock star." "Likewise," he said, grinning. Laughter erupted again, filling the little break room, and in those moments Jenna realized just how far they had come. It was no longer about eye rolls and salutes, it was about building each other up. They were a dynamic duo now, thriving off each other's strengths. As the weeks turned to months, they continued to grow, facing challenges and celebrating victories as a team. It became clear to Jenna that Jack wasn't just a charming presence, he was a true ally. Reflecting on the early days, Jenna marveled at how a simple name had turned into an unexpected journey. She thought back to that moment of eye-rolling disappointment, feelings of jealousy morphing into respect and collaboration. Jenna called out one day, catching him in the hallway. "Thanks for being well, you." "Right back at you, Jenna. It takes two to tango," he replied with a playful wink. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared success. She had learned that even the most unlikely connections could turn into the strongest alliances. In that bustling office, filled with coworkers bustling about and laughter echoing through the halls, Jenna discovered not just challenges but growth, not just competition but camaraderie. As she turned to walk back to her desk, a smile spread across her face, light and unburdened. They were two individuals who began as rivals and had forged a bond powerful enough to redefine what they both believed about each other. Each day was a new chapter in their story, a tale of growth, respect, and the magic that happens when you allow the walls around you to come down. She looked forward to every interaction, every challenge, and most of all, every victory, hand in hand with someone who had turned from an annoyance into a friend. Jack had transformed from merely a name. She rolled her eyes at into a person who had helped her discover her own strength. And that was worth more than all the accolades in the world. Tim's voice erupted from across the office, sending a wave of excitement rippling through the room. Jenna felt her stomach drop. Jack, just the sound of his name sent a heaviness coursing through her bones. She took a deep breath, then rolled her eyes dramatically, an automatic reaction. The whole office fell under a spell every time Jack returned from yet another work trip. If she concentrated hard enough, she could almost hear the collective sigh of adoration echoing back her way. If only they knew the real Jack, she thought. He was charming, sure, but he had a way of turning every interaction into a grand performance. It felt like the spotlight could only shine on him, leaving her in the shadows. Her heart raced as she caught sight of his entrance stall, confident, perfectly composed. The moment he walked in, Mr. Collins leaped from his seat, a beaming smile stretched across his face. "Welcome back, Jack, Mr." Collins stood at attention, and to Jenna's utter disbelief, he saluted Jack like he was in the military. At that moment, she pinched the bridge of her nose, suppressing a chuckle but feeling that familiar anger flare. "He's no hero," she muttered under her breath. How did this guy manage to command such reverence? Waves of laughter erupted around them, all eyes fixated on Jack as he began sharing stories from his latest journey. Jenna found it infuriating. He was charming, weaving tales that captivated everyone, including Tim, who leaned in mesmerized. Jenna sunk lower in her chair, the realization settling like a weight in her stomach. While she would work twice as hard, he would reap all the rewards. Tim asked, breaking her thoughts. "Of course not, it's just..." She felt the frustration spilling from her lips as if she couldn't contain it any longer. "Look, Jenna, he has a way with words, but you know your stuff too. Data doesn't matter when everyone's busy fawning over him," she snapped, feeling a mix of resentment and self-doubt. The day crawled on, but Jenna's irritation simmered beneath the surface. Each joyful exclamation from the crowd around Jack only fueled her frustration. She slipped into her work, trying to drown out the noise, but the buzz of office excitement felt electric, a tension building that she couldn't ignore. When the all-hands meeting came around, Jenna braced herself, knowing Jack would once again take center stage. Everyone filled the conference room, eagerly waiting for Jack to arrive. Jenna felt a sense of dread wash over her, the air thick with anticipation. "Now let's give a warm welcome to our star," Mr. Collins pronounced, clapping his hands excitedly as Jack strolled in. The applause washed over the room, drowning out all thoughts Jenna had to offer. She clenched her fists under the table, her resolve wavering. Jack stood tall, unfazed by the attention, launching into yet another presentation filled with dazzling stories and infectious energy. He had an incredible knack for captivating the audience, turning even the most mundane updates into gripping tales. Jenna sat back, feeling invisible as the room giggled and gasped in delight. Jack said, a glimmer in his eye as he offered her the spotlight, the room's focus shifting like a spotlight on stage. The tension surged, and she felt her heart pounding in her chest. "Thanks, Jack," she stuttered, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She tried to gather her thoughts, but immediately felt her voice quivering. "I think we need to," Jack interrupted smoothly with a disarming smile. "Data can be so dry, though." "Right," Jenna mumbled, her voice shrinking into the background as laughter filled the room again. Why couldn't she ever get a word in? Why did she feel so small? In the days that followed, Jenna stewed in her frustration. Each time Jack walked into the office, it felt like the air thickened with expectation. She wondered. Finally, after another grueling week, Jenna resolved to change the narrative. She wouldn't be overshadowed any longer. The next all-hands meeting approached, and she prepared diligently, outlining her thoughts and insights. When the meeting began, Jenna felt the all-too-familiar tension creep in as Mr. Collins called on her. All eyes turned expectantly. Sweat trickled down her back. I believe we need to focus on the data." She felt the moment shift. Jack looked over at her, surprise etched on his features. "That's true, Jenna," he said, acknowledging her words with a nod. "Sure, but we can't build everything on enthusiasm without grounding it in facts," she asserted, feeling braver than she had moments before. A shift began to unfold in the room, a spark igniting where once there had only been tension. She could feel Jack processing the exchange, and for the first time there was an openness in his demeanor that made her heart race. Days melted into weeks, and Jenna began to lean into this dynamic. They exchanged ideas rhythmically, sparring verbally but with laughter lining the edges of their words. Conversations flowed more naturally, and Jenna discovered that Jack wasn't solely a golden boy in the office. He had his doubts, his vulnerabilities, which made him relatable in unexpected ways. One afternoon, Jack threw her a compliment that caught her off guard. "You know, I underestimated you at first," he said as they prepped for a project. Her mouth twitched into a smile, the tension between them transforming. "Thanks, Jack, and I didn't realize you could show restraint once in a while," she teased back. They laughed together, and it felt as if a curtain had lifted. What started as rivalry had evolved into a partnership, each learning to bring out the best in the other. As they worked together, Jenna found a new rhythm. Presentations turned smoother, meetings felt like conversations rather than contests. The dynamic shifted, and each time the two were in a room together, a sense of synergy hummed in the air. Finally, the company's annual presentation approached, and Jenna felt the usual nerves buzzing. She and Jack would be presenting together, combining their strengths, her analytical side and his storytelling charisma. When the moment arrived, Jenna stepped in front of the audience alongside Jack and felt a rush of excitement course through her veins. They took turns leading the presentation, easily merging data and anecdotes that flowed seamlessly, captivating their audience. As the applause rang out, a wave of relief washed over Jenna. As they turned to each other, she felt a grin stretch wide on her face. Jack's eyes sparkled. We really did. Days rolled by and the collaboration strengthened. Jenna began to learn from Jack's approach, allowing her own energy to bubble and expand within her. She felt more confident and the office dynamics had shifted. The eye rolls she had once directed toward Jack began to shift into something more amicable. Jenna, Tim called one morning, rushing toward her desk. Jack just presented our project to the execs and they loved it. Jenna felt disbelief wash over her. Yeah, apparently they're impressed with how well you two work together, he said, beaming. As the weeks passed, the collaboration turned into a partnership overflowing with mutual respect. Jenna realized she valued Jack's insights and she felt pride in what they were building together. One afternoon, as they reviewed their latest presentation, a playful smile curled Jack's lips. Jenna laughed, a twinkle in her eye. They shared a genuine smile, a new understanding sealed between them. In that moment, Jenna felt empowered, her confidence flourishing alongside the growth in their partnership. Jack asked, his gaze curious. Can't resist a caffeine boost, she replied, laughing. As they emerged from the meeting, stepping into the muted chatter of the break room, the realization hit her. The once frustrating presence of Jack had transformed into someone she truly looked forward to seeing. With each laugh and word exchanged, Jenna understood the power of connection. She hadn't just learned about numbers, she had learned about building relationships, and she had discovered that sometimes the people we least expect can turn into our greatest allies. Thanks for being such a good partner, Jack, Jenna said, savoring the moment's warmth. Thank you for showing me the importance of balance, Jack replied sincerely. In that bustling office, filled with laughter and camaraderie, Jenna felt she had finally found her place. Gone were the days of conflict and jealousy, replaced by a connection that only grew stronger with time. As she walked down the hall beside Jack, she realized that what began with an eye roll had blossomed into a meaningful partnership built on collaboration and trust. The journey they had traveled was unexpected but rich with growth. And as life unfolded, Jenna no longer felt the need to roll her eyes at Jack's name. Instead, she found herself smiling. Together, they were crafting a story worth telling, one that reminded them both how valuable teamwork could truly be. Tim's voice broke through the everyday buzz of the office, carrying an excitement that felt almost palpable. Jenna immediately felt the familiar irritation spike within her. Just the mention of Jack's name could turn her stomach like a roller coaster taking a steep drop. She rolled her eyes, a hard habit to break, especially in a place where everyone acted as though Jack was some kind of celebrity. Her colleagues gathered at the entrance, eager to see him, and for a fleeting moment, Jenna wondered if she was the only one who saw through the charm. When Jack finally strolled in, the air around him shifted. Tall, confident, and effortlessly suave, he had that magnetism that pulled people into his orbit. Jenna watched as Mr. Collins, their manager, sprang from his chair and beamed, "Welcome back, Jack." The salute Mr. Collins threw up was so exaggerated it bordered on the farcical. What was this, a military ceremony? Jenna felt an absurd urge to laugh, but it quickly turned into frustration. This guy waltzed in like he owned the place, and all she could think was how tiring it was to be around someone who seemed to suck the joy out of hard work. Tim nudged her. "What's the matter?" Jenna shot back. "Come on, he's not that bad," Tim said, rolling his eyes at her defensiveness. "Not that bad, just wait till he starts telling his stories." The conversation flowed around her like a rushing river, leaving Jenna to struggle against the current. She tried to focus on her tasks, but the laughter and excitement surrounding Jack echoed in her ears, gnawing at her patience. She had poured hours into her work, yet here was Jack, the great Jack, charming everyone while she felt invisible. By mid-morning, the anticipation had grown thick, and when the all-hands meeting was finally scheduled, the tension was palpable. She watched as Jack took his place at the front, ready to take everyone on a journey through his latest adventures. Mr. Collins announced, his approval glowing like a spotlight aimed squarely at Jack. The applause was deafening, and Jenna's heart weighed heavy in her chest, resentment swirling within her. Jack leaped into his presentation, spinning tales with a magnetic flair that could have ensnared even the most cynical of hearts. Everyone drank in every word, every ecstatic gesture that came with his stories. Jenna felt the anger rise from her toes, creeping up like a vine. How was it fair that he could command the room while she was left as a mere observer? As if summoned by her frustration, Jack turned his gaze toward her. "And of course, we have Jenna here." His voice rang with confidence, yet Jenna felt trapped under the spotlight. She stammered, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Fear washed over her as Jack smiled innocently, making the moment feel like a stage prank. "I think we need to focus on the data we collected." "Oh, data," Jack chuckled, shooting her a look that clearly said he was above such boring concepts. The room erupted in laughter again, pouring cold water on Jenna's attempt to contribute. It all felt like a punchline she wasn't in on. Of course, she shot back, trying to reclaim her voice. Jack smirked, and for a fleeting moment she saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Maybe we can both work on that, Jenna." His tone danced along the line of condescension, but she couldn't help noticing how the room shifted their attention to her. The meeting ended with a sense of unresolved tension sitting heavily on her shoulders. As coworkers filtered out, Tim sidled up next to her. "You did great, you know." "I felt like I was battling a dragon," she admitted, rubbing her temple. "Just remember, you have your strengths too," he said, but Jenna couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. The following days felt like a repeating cycle. Jack would captivate the office and she would retreat into the background, but something began to shift within her. A flicker of determination ignited. If Jack could command the room with his charisma, maybe she had what it took to capture attention too. Jenna prepared for the next all-hands meeting as if it were a battle. She sketched out her notes and rehearsed her lines, practicing the conviction that might finally bring her voice to the forefront. As the meeting commenced, Jenna felt the familiar pressure in the air as Mr. Collins turned to her. All eyes fell on her and the weight felt as heavy as stone. "Yes," she began, fighting back nerves. "We've collected significant data that shows a different angle than what Jack suggested. I think we should explore how these metrics can provide insights." Jack interjected, his tone playful, but there was an edge to it that felt dismissive. She glared at him, frustration bubbling to the surface. Silence hung like a thick fog, and Jenna felt her heartbeat echo in her ears. Jack looked at her, surprise flickering in his expression. The moment felt charged, and Jenna wondered if the room felt it too, the challenge set between them. "Nobody wants to hear just numbers," he replied, and Jenna braced herself for the laughter that might follow, but she stood her ground. "But numbers can tell us powerful stories when we frame them correctly," she challenged, feeling emboldened by her words. Finally, the tide began to shift. Something in Jack's demeanor changed, a recognition of her point settling in. Days floated by, and their interactions began to evolve. They sparred, but it was less about competition and more about respect, like athletes pushing each other to excel. Their meetings gradually transformed from monologues into dynamic exchanges, two minds working toward a common goal. One afternoon, as they dissected another project together, Jack leaned back in his chair, a playful glint in his eyes. She shot back with a playful smile, enjoying this newfound camaraderie. He replied with mock offense, leaning closer in a conspiratorial manner. As the weeks unfolded, Jenna felt the pressure lift. The dread that used to spiral around Jack's entrance morphed into anticipation. They collaborated so effectively that the synergy surprised even her. Finally, the big presentation day arrived. With Jack by her side, Jenna felt a strange mix of excitement and nerves. They stood in front of the executive board, the room buzzing with anticipation. The way they merged data with stories went beyond just their strengths. It became something far greater. As they presented, Jenna noted the way Jack and she moved harmoniously, challenging and building off one another. When they finished their pitch, the applause rolled through the room like thunder, creating a rush of adrenaline. Jack turned to her, eyes shining. "We really did," she replied, exhilarated. The thrill pulsed through her veins. After the meeting, Mr. Collins approached them. "Incredible work, you two make quite the team. I've never seen such a blended approach work so well." Jenna felt a swell of pride as the compliment washed over her. Slowly, maybe just a bit, the hierarchy of the office was balancing out. Once the buzz of the day settled, she found herself in the break room, pouring a cup of coffee when Jack walked in. He asked casually, leaning against the counter. "I don't know," she admitted, taking a sip. "Maybe we should keep doing this," Jack said, a grin stretching across his face. But as the days turned into weeks, Jenna felt that playful spark take on a different meaning. The rivalry had shifted to deep respect, a genuine friendship forged in the heat of competition. She could finally see Jack as more than just the untouchable star. He was a partner, someone who brought out the best in her. Then one fateful morning, everything changed. Jack strolled into the office, his expression unusually serious. Jenna felt a chill run through her as he approached her desk. "Hey, can we talk?" "It's important," he said, his voice low. She replied, unease creeping in. His voice trailed off, and all of Jenna's senses heightened. As Jack opened his mouth to speak, the office door swung open. It was Mr. Collins, and his expression was grim. "We need everyone in the conference room now." Jenna's heart raced as a sinking feeling filled her chest. She glanced at Jack, and something in the air changed. They both stood as Mr. Collins hurriedly led them to the meeting room, an urgency hanging over them like thick fog. As they entered, the room fell silent, the atmosphere charged with tension. Jenna's mind whirled. What could be so serious? She exchanged a glance with Jack, his brow furrowed, and she held her breath. The moment she realized something monumental was about to unfold, she felt the world shift beneath her. Suddenly, Mr. Collins nodded toward the door. A collective gasp filled the room as Jenna felt the weight of the news pound against her. Jack looked at her, both of their minds racing with questions. Mr. Collins continued, "We need to regroup and come up with a plan immediately." And in that instant, the world around her blurred. The stakes had risen, and the road ahead was suddenly fraught with uncertainty. Jenna's heart surged with adrenaline as she cast a wary glance at Jack. Together, they had weathered many storms, but this was a tidal wave threatening to pull them under. Jenna squeezed her hands together, determination spilling into her veins. She turned to Jack, who was already catching her eye, a silent promise forming between them. They would navigate this sea of uncertainty together, no matter what lay ahead. The game had changed, and it was time to rise to the challenge.